right, thank you for joining me for a few minutes. I just want to continue building on the conversation that we have had over the last several videos, and today I'm just going to, just put some things on the table. I look forward to when we can actually, get together and have this conversation as a group of people face to face. In the meantime, I'll just continue sharing things and just humbly ask that you process, you see what your thoughts are, and then when we come together, we'll just be able to share together, work together, and have conversations that are very meaningful in the sense they help further the gospel, they help us in our discipleship, they help us shape and understanding what God is doing in our church. So let me list several things for you today. Number one, think small. This kind of is counterintuitive to churches because the whole kind of premise of most churches is how can we think bigger, how can we do bigger, how can we be bigger. And sometimes to come in with a voice that says think small sounds like it's going in the wrong direction. It sounds like it's the very opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. Well, let's just take it out for a spin for a moment. Thinking small is actually the way, the means through which we can think about missions, let's say, in a community, or missions in a nation, or missions in a global sense. There is something of a reality that when we think small, we're not saying that we want to think small in the sense that we want to create the smallest possible space or the smallest possible box that we can to live in. We're saying that we want to think small in terms of what are some of the personal relationships that I have in my life? How do those relationships reflect discipleship? How do those relationships enable me to be more looking like Jesus? And consequently, how do the relationships already in my life, how do those relationships help other people look more like Jesus? It's a lot easier to think huge than it is to think small. And you would think it would be the opposite, but it's more intricate, it's more personal, it's more the way life is really lived when we think small. We have all of us probably have, numbers of friends that we could rattle off, or names of people we have met along life's way, and people that we enjoy being with, or people that we wonder how are they doing, or I haven't seen or heard from them in some time. I hope they're still doing well, and so forth. But the reality is, for all of us, that there are usually only a handful of people that over the entire course of life that we would really call our deep friends. People that we really are invested in, people that we really know about, people who really know us, who understand the way we think and the way that we feel, and how we are designed, and the way that we are built, and all of those things. And this is a reality that Jesus lived in as well. God loved the entire world. But how did Jesus go about that? He did that by thinking small, in the sense he only chose 12 people to stay with him, to travel with him, to be his learners and disciples. And you would think, how could it possibly be that somebody's mission is to bring redemption to the entire world? How could he think so small? And not only that, think about how small of a span of time he worked all of that in. if he lived to be approximately 32, 33 years old, something like that, out of all of those years, only 2.5 or perhaps 3 years were spent in public ministry. It would seem far more likely that as soon as he was 20, 21, 22, he would have stepped onto the stage and started making a difference, but he thought small. And he knew that the power to be able to reach the world was by thinking, who are people that I can, a small number of people, who I can actually and truthfully invest my life in, not so that the gospel could be contained to a small group of people, but for the very opposite effect, so that the gospel could be sent to a much larger group of people, or the gospel could overflow to a larger group of people. So I'm going to encourage us to think small. It really, in some ways, it comes natural because of relationships. It allows greater health. When we kind of invest ourselves in the immediate relationships that we can have healthier relationships. We can have more intimate relationships with people. The other thing that it does is that it helps churches, especially like ours, a church in the Western world, who freely uses terms like congregation, and we understand what that means. You know, we congregate, we all come together, and we love that. We enjoy that, and we're able to do things congregationally that we can't do in other ways. But sometimes a missing piece to a congregation is thinking small enough to think in terms of community. And what I mean by that is communities within the congregation. Communities that are small enough where people, and the truth of the matter is, we have some of those organically at Ivy, and it's a beautiful thing to see, but communities that are small enough where people can take care of each other, where people can watch over each other, where people can have very honest conversations with each other, where people can have shared life together. And there's something really beautiful about living in community. The danger, or the flip side of living in community, is that we realize that the purpose, or we forget that the purpose of living in community is to reach a larger community. And so sometimes when communities are started or they are begun, they kind of turn inward on themselves and forget that the entire purpose, the entire reason why we have this smaller community is so that we can bless the larger community, or that we can bless the world in which we live. So just going to encourage you to think small, and to think in terms, especially now where we can't have the kind of congregational, personal gatherings that we like, but think about the community that you are a part of, and think about the way that that smaller group of relationships can be enriched, and how by using that smaller group of relationships, everybody in that group can be enriched as followers of Jesus Christ. And by that growth that we have in whatever group or whatever community we are in, we're able to actually reach beyond ourselves and think beyond ourselves, and to connect with people beyond ourselves. But the first step to that is thinking small. Second thing I'd like to encourage you to do, encourage us as a church family to do wherever we possibly can, and this is not new, we've mentioned this a little bit before, and that is to think simply. Oftentimes churches can be the most complicated place that a person belongs to. If anything, churches should be very simple. The gospel message is simple. What we are here to do is simple. Now I know that life is complicated and relationships get complicated and infrastructure gets complicated and all of those things. And sometimes that clouds the vision of just being simple. A lot of us probably talk about this in our own personal lives. How many times you may have walked through your own house and thought to yourself, I should live more simply. I want a more simple life. The beauty of living a more simplified life is that you have more liberty, you have more freedom. Again, let Jesus be your model in this. He's the Son of God. He walks among us. He doesn't even have a place to lay his head. He lives as simply as anybody ever could, and yet he is the definition of what life is. He has life more abundant. So much life that he freely can give himself away. He freely can meet with anybody that he wants to. He can go where he wants to. So free that he can go to Calvary. That is really a lot of freedom. That is what true simplicity looks like. And oftentimes, especially again as people in our culture, we've bought into the myth for a good number of years that the more stuff that we have makes our life better. And the reality is that the more stuff we have really does not usually make our life more simple. It usually makes it more congested. It usually makes it more complicated. It usually makes it more confusing. Rarely does it simplify life. And I think God is calling his people to be more simple, to live more simply in our world. Through our current crisis, a lot of us are having to do just that. We are learning how to simplify our life. The payoff in that it is going to be, I can't wait to hear the stories in which as we simplified, we actually became more productive. As we simplified, we actually developed maybe some spiritual disciplines we would not have developed otherwise. As we simplified, we actually realized that we were craving for deeper and better relationships. As we simplified, we saw God more clearly and we began to have a deeper experience with God. So this is a great time to think about simplifying, and it not only applies obviously to relationships, oftentimes even more applicable to the infrastructures or the structures that we have. Sometimes churches are so complicated with their structures that they can't function. All of their energy, all of their resource, all of the time, all of the effort, a great deal of expenditure goes to making structure work. And there's always the fear that structures cannot be changed, and once a church gets there and their structures are not simple anymore, or structures are not adaptable anymore, then the structure will end up being the tyrant. And the structure will just be the boss of us. And we will end up serving structure or infrastructure, just like last time we talked about the notion that we build our buildings and we shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us. Well, that happens in infrastructure. And when we have infrastructure or structure that is simple, then we are able to think more clearly, to be more honest about the mission. We're able to be more adaptable. We're able to be able to go from A to Z rather than just going from A to C, because we can adapt very well and we're more fluid. We are able to be more organic. We're able to entertain more ministry ideas. We're able to invite more people to engage in ministry. And all of that kind of flows out of and grows out of thinking more simply. I'd like to also encourage us as we think more, as we think small, as we think simple, to think strategically. And that is, what are we really wanting to accomplish? I'm going to mention just two. We want to equip people and empower people for ministry. Every one of us, as we've already discussed, is on mission for Christ. You are a minister. You don't have to have a degree on the wall. You don't have to have a diploma or a seminary education. But you are a minister as a follower of Jesus Christ. So the real question is, how are you best equipped? How do we help best resource and equip you for the particular ministry that God has called you to? And so this is a great season to think about how you can be equipped, how a church family, as a family, can offer resources that equip you, and then in equipping you, to empower you. Power is a very abusive thing in a lot of churches, and it kind of flows up the hierarchy, as we've talked about on a number of occasions. Power should be flowing from Christ to his people. And the reason why Christ's people have power is not so that they can control and manage things, but so that they can serve and bless people. You see the difference? And so, as we think strategically, let's think more in terms and have more conversations about what do we need to do to equip? How do we empower you? One of my life's passions, as most of you have probably kind of figured out, is equipping people to read the Bible. For the greater part, our American culture is biblically illiterate, and I know you don't mind me saying this. I've said it before. I long to see people be able to open the Bible and have a level of competency about what they're reading. They know how to read the Bible. They know how to do some measure of interpretation. They know how to engage the Bible. They know how to articulate the Bible. And I just really long for helping people get to a place where we're not just driven when we open the Bible in our Bible studies to curriculum, which is kind of boxed us in, and it's kept people from growing for a very long time. I know the intent behind it is good, but picture a garden in which the rains come, the sun comes. There's all of this stuff of the Bible in the garden. And the more that we actually engage the Bible and we are better equipped and better resourced to do the Bible, the greater our growth, our roots will grow into the Bible, and the more productive our fruit will be biblical fruit. And we can grow and grow and grow. We don't have to confine ourselves to a particular curriculum, whatever it is. I just long for people to be biblically free, so open that they can take their Bibles and say, I know how to read a psalm. I know how to read a gospel. I know how to hear a prophet. I know how to read a theological story. I know why an epistle is designed that way, or I know how to read apocalyptic literature. And then allow our discussions and our explorations just to set us on seas that we would have never experienced any other way. Man, I can't tell you how badly I long to see a church set free. I mean, just totally free with the Bible in such a way that people can use resources they never even imagined they would have available to them, and be able to engage the Bible in ways that just haven't dreamt of. And so I've got a deep, deep passion for that. Imagine multiplying that passion over and over by bringing your passion and someone else's passion and the deep passions that we all have being able to share that with each other. I'd love to help you in that way. You have things that would be very helpful and meaningful to me, and you would help me to grow in ways. Imagine a church family so passionate about the gift and the way that God is working in their life that we share that passion or we share that gift with each other, and we help each other to live more fully in Christ, to live more freely in Christ, to walk away from the things that have held us captive for a long time, and to be able to actually grow in ways that we can feel ourselves growing and maturing. Wouldn't that be beautiful? And then think service. When most of us who are people in church think service, we think of a worship service, and that is certainly fine, but think about service in terms of what can I do? How can I serve the people in my life, a community, the world? I think we all know that we don't find fulfillment until we're giving ourselves away. It's not in collecting stuff. It's not in having more. It's when we get to a place that we are giving away that we find fulfillment and meaning in life. And Jesus, again, he's the model for that. Think living generously, even in a time like this where we're having to probably watch more carefully our personal budgets and all of that. It's certainly understandable and wise to do. At the same time, let me encourage you to encourage us together to realize that God's not in a financial crisis. He never has been. And the more we practice generosity, the more God is willing to bless His people. I've just discovered that throughout life, and some of you have too. And so this is a beautiful time, a beautiful season in which we think about service and we think about living generously. How do I share? How do I bless? How do I not try to see how much I can hold on to? How do I see how I can use my hands to be the hands of Jesus that bless, deliver, and give? Giving ourselves away. Oh, what a gospel that is. What a thing that Jesus did. Imagine a church that just learns that one thing, that we're going to live in the land of generosity by giving ourselves away. And then finally, today, think Spirit. None of the stuff we've talked about happens without the Holy Spirit. None of it happens within our own strength. None of it happens because we have a meeting and we talk about it. None of it happens because we write it all down and we pass it out to everybody and we ask everybody to sign off on it or read it and so forth. It only happens because of the Spirit of the living God. The Spirit is with us. The Spirit is among us. The Spirit indwells us. And if we want to think small, and by thinking small, reach the world, that's what the Spirit does, because we usually don't think that way. If we want to think simple and ask the Spirit, how do we simplify our lives so we can be more productive and more fruitful, the Spirit will lead us in that. If we want to think more strategically so that we can equip and empower people, that's a work of the Spirit. If we want to think in terms of service, of how we give ourselves away and how we live in generosity, I mean, it's just part of our DNA to live generously. I mean, that's something that the Spirit does. So, family of Ivy, thank you for a few moments just to share some things together. I trust that they will be helpful and encouraging and a blessing to you. And when we're together, all of these things we'll have on the table, and we'll have a lot of fun learning, loving together, growing together, and seeing how God works among us. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.